MEA here in India has now come out with a statement. They say this matter has been taken up with the Chinese government. This is the latest that we can tell our viewers about. The MEA has taken up the matter with the Chinese government. Suhasini either still with us, as is Pramit Pal Chowdhury. Pramit, your take on this first. Do we have clarity on whether the Obama administration moved this in their last few days, or is it the new Trump administration that is pushing it?
Well, it would have to be, I mean, the point is that something like this would have to be cleared by the incoming Secretary of State. So it is irrelevant, it was actually pointless to argue that the Obama administration moved it. It would still have to be okayed by Rex Tillerson, who was confirmed a few weeks ago. Nothing this large would be done automatically by somebody in the UN without clearance from the new administration. That person would lose his job immediately. So I think that's a moot point. The Trump administration has clearly decided that this policy, the continuity on this policy will continue. And therefore, there will be no change as far as the new government is concerned. And that's good, as you've mentioned, for India, because it continues to isolate China within the UN. The entire understanding has been to pressure China. They know that China desperately does not want to inconvenience its ally Pakistan.
Right.
But China traditionally has been reluctant to be the last man standing in the UN. So if all the other Security Council members push in one direction, there have been cases in the past where China has succumbed, solely on the basis that they don't want to be isolated.
Speaking of which, Pramit, stay on. We are now getting more inputs. The UK and France both have backed the US resolution at the UN, so it does seem like there is added pressure now, and perhaps the US, France and the UK, all three together, constitute really a large part of the Security Council vote there. It's 3 against 1 technically. We'll have to wait what Russia decides, of course. Suhasini, as Pramit was telling us right now, it had to have the sanction of the new Secretary of State. Tillerson just got confirmed, and now we understand that 3 out of the 5 Security Council members are pushing for Azhar's ban. Now, do you think, given the fact that Trump has in the past made China an issue, and he would love to pick a fight with China, really, to distract from other things back home, do you believe this could be the time where this window, this opportunity perhaps could come good?
Well, I can't presume to what Mr. Trump will decide to take up as an issue, but the truth is that US, UK and France have always sponsored these resolutions in the last couple of years. The question, as you very rightly pointed out, is what is Russia going to do? Why is Russia, India's traditional ally, not backing this resolution when it has come for the second time, when India made it clear that it would be working with all the new members of the Security Council that have joined on January 1st, as well as the old ones, in order to bring this through. Now, India is not a member of the Security Council at present, so the proposal has to be pushed by some of the members inside there. It's important that 3 of the 5 UNSC members are actually moving the proposal. But the fact remains that over the last 2.5 years, we have seen China block such proposals on several occasions. In fact, I think in the last 2.5 years, China has not allowed any of these moves to go through, even when there was clear evidence on Zakir Rahman, Lakhvi contravening the UNSC guidelines by getting bail, whether it was Syed Salahuddin or whether it was the others. So the question really is what has changed. You're quite right that the Trump administration getting involved in this means that there is a continuity on the U.S. side. But has the U.S. side been able to deliver China yet? Not really.
No, and what about the factor, Pramit? Let me just take it away from what Suhasini said. Will they be able really to deliver China, as she put it, on this, given the fact that Trump has been spewing anti-China rhetoric whenever he can? Would you believe that could factor in the fact that Trump would like to or love to pick a fight with China to assuage a large part of his constituency back home as well?
Yeah, I mean, China, as you've mentioned, there have been a number of countries who've been very critical of. China tops the list. But I think the other way to look upon it would be, can Trump deliver Russia? Because keep in mind, one of the Russia over the past 3 or 4 years has become very close to China. In fact, a lot of what it does now is dictated by its interests, its relationship with Beijing, which is now in many ways stronger than it is with New Delhi. But on the other hand, Russia desperately is hoping that Trump, who has clearly indicated he does not hold as much hostility, that quite admires Vladimir Putin, and is otherwise in many ways supportive of the idea of some sort of rapprochement with Russia. Russia may wonder to itself, this is a man who's president who's actually indicated he wants to lift sanctions, work with us. If we vote against him, are we souring our relationship, potential relationship with Trump? And I think that's going to be an interesting game. I think one of the reasons why Moscow is keeping silent right now is that they're weighing that, yes, China will be unhappy, but if Trump is unhappy, we lose a potential transformational shift in the relationship with the U.S.
So, Asni, could it also factor in the fact that Rex Tillerson is, quote-unquote, great friends with Mr. Putin? In fact, Mr. Putin awarded him one of the highest Russian honors very recently. He has a great working relationship, not to mention business interests in Russia. The delivery of Russia, could that also factor that in?
It could be an issue, but I think Tillerson is not so much a friend of Russia, but Tillerson is very clear he doesn't support economic sanctions. He thinks, as a businessman would, that sanctions are a silly diplomatic exercise, and he's made that very clear in his talks, too, privately with people I know, that he said that, look, sanctions is a silly idea. We can have problems with Russia, but sanctioning them doesn't work. And broadly, that the Trump administration as a whole believes that point, takes that point of view, especially the businessmen in it. And that's exactly that's music for Russia's ear.
Would you agree with that? So, Asni, would you agree with that? The fact that Tillerson has in the past as well suggested that he is not really in favor of sanctions on Russia. He would like a better working relationship with Putin as well. So does Donald Trump time and again. Right. He refuses to criticize Putin off and on.
You know, the fact is that if U.S.-Russia ties are going to get closer, they're certainly not going to hinge on the issue of Masood Azhar. Firstly. Secondly, Russia has not voted against the U.S. even in the last few votes. When it comes to Masood Azhar, they have simply kept quiet and voted to designate Masood Azhar, but certainly not taken any strong line. I think the MES formulation has been that none of the 15 members of the UNSC besides China had actually voted against designating Masood Azhar, and that was important for them. So we would like to hear from Russia, which is supposed to be a traditional ally of India, to see exactly where it goes. We see where Russia has been voting in the last month when it comes to the UNSC 1267. When it came to the Hizb-e-Lahri's leader, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who is in a deal with Afghanistan, Russia and China voted together to stop him being undesignated from the 1267 committee. When it came to certain Taliban leaders, Russia and China voted together in order to ensure that their designations were taken off. So essentially, we are looking at Russia and China working together on other issues in this very committee. And I think it would be a bit far-fetched to assume that Masood Azhar will become the place where Russia will break with China in any very large way. Even if it does, at the end of the day, India still has to deal with the fact that China has veto power and has exercised that veto power over the last few years. So I think to take away from all of this is the fact that India remains committed to the designation of Masood Azhar. Secondly, that the U.S. government seems to see a continuity in keeping this policy going, and that the U.S., UK, and France continue to back India when it comes to the issue of Masood Azhar. Now, Masood Azhar has not been banned, but his organization remains banned in Pakistan. It hasn't really fetched up much results for India, nor has the ban on Hafiz Saeed, for that matter, over this past decade. But even so, if India is committed to get that designation on Masood Azhar to go through, this is certainly one way to do it. To put the vote in, to put the proposal in, let China put a technical hold on it, and then use the next 6 months in order to convince China that it really makes much more sense to allow the designation to go through.
Well, as far as we know, the MEA, of course, has already spoken out on this, Pramit, and they have said in a statement that they've already taken up the matter with the Chinese. But would you think, or would you suggest that instead of lobbying China, which we know really their position, if there is an opportunity to be had here, India would much rather lobby Russia on this?
Well, I think definitely definitely, especially if Russia is still fence-sitting, we'd definitely be lobbying with Russia. The issue, though, would be to lobby with both. But the game would be with China would be basically say that, look, you admit you know you have a terrorism problem yourself. You have these issues yourself. Why are you opposing this? Because privately, when you talk to the Chinese, they're very clear that they are nervous about Islamist terror coming out of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and that they think that Pakistan attempts to use terrorism as an instrument of statecraft against India is a dangerous thing, because Pakistan basically doesn't control a lot of what they're creating out there.
Right.
So therefore, you basically have to keep telling the Chinese that your own attempts to reform Pakistan's stability, which is what they're really interested in more, also will be helped. That your own interests, China's own interests regarding Pakistan will be helped if you vote in our favor. And that's going to, of course, be a very difficult story to sell. But isolating China and keeping up the pressure on this front is something that will have to be done. As let the Chinese hopefully take this on board and change their mind over time.
Pramit, how much of it will all depend really on the ISI and the military establishment giving in really to if China sees the light, as some would say? How much of that would be factored in as far as the military intelligence in Pakistan, the establishment in Pakistan is concerned? Because after all, Masood Azhar is part of their extended arsenal.
The ISI will never agree to this. I mean, for them, this is their man. And Lashkar and therefore Jaish, which is a derivative of Lashkar, are the other Islamist terror groups in Pakistan which are most closely linked to the ISI. I mean, Lashkar is a direct creation of the ISI. And so they obviously will never come to agree to something like this. The real issue is that China has, when it feels, China's ruthless in pursuing its own interests. And in the past, it has ticked off Pakistan when it's been unhappy with policies that Pakistan has done. And Pakistan really has no choice but to basically swallow that if China decides to basically rap them on the knuckles and say, look, this is a silly policy.
Right, and there are indications there, Pramit. I'd just like to get a quick question into Suhasini before I go to Geeta Mohan, who's also joining us on Skype. Suhasini, there is a school of thought in Pakistan which assumes that the external pressure that was exercised to put Hafiz Saeed under house arrest didn't really come from the US, it came from the Chinese itself.
Certainly, and we have seen a lot of reports to that effect. The truth is that later this month, on February 19th, there's going to be a new plenary of the FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force of the international body, where it is reported that Pakistan is under pressure to being redesignated as a non-cooperative country. Much of Pakistan's actions are believed to have come from that. Let's be honest, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Masood Azhar, Hafiz Saeed have been something India has been talking about for at least 2 decades now.
Right.
And it doesn't seem to have changed the position vis-a-vis what Pakistan does with them. They go into house arrest, they come out of house arrest, there's an FIR against them, they come back. So the truth is, even this UN designation is extremely suspect.
So Suhasini and Pramit, stay with us. Geeta Mohan, my colleague, joining us via Skype now. Geeta, big development as far as India is also concerned. We understand the MEA has already taken up the matter with the Chinese. What else can you tell us as far as the MEA is concerned? Geeta, can you hear me?
Well, on this one, it has just happened. So officially, there has been no conversation, but we do know that China, in principle, opposes any such move on Masood Azhar and on Jaish-e-Mohammed. So the fact of the matter is that there is a of in terms of what India really wants and how India is looking at this entire development. But at this juncture, it is a welcome news with the US backing India on initiating this entire resolution on Masood Azhar, and it could benefit India. But things have changed when it comes to how China is looking at the 1267 Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee. We know in the past all those resolutions that were backed by the United States of America have always found favor and support from China. But this time around, that could not be the case. It could be different under Trump administration. China could be looking at it differently, and Pakistan continues to be an important country. So, like Suhasini Haider said, all the talk about how this really looks in the international arena and how it is really going to play out when it comes to really getting him listed, getting these organizations barred, and getting Jaish-e-Mohammed, Masood Azhar be called a terrorist is something that only can happen if China is on board. Right now, it doesn't seem like the case for China to be on board or to be coming out in support of either India or particularly the United States of America.
Geeta, just one more question before we let you go. As Suhasini and Pramit were telling us, and I completely agree with them here, what's more interesting to watch now is which way will Russia go, given the fact it's the 4th Security Council member. In the past, Russia, of course, has not voted against China. Perhaps this is a window of opportunity. India could lobby the Russians as well. All right. We seem to have lost Geeta there on the Skype connection. Thank you, Suhasini Haider and Pramit Pal Chowdhury, for joining us.